Thanks for listening to our podcast Unmetered. As a member-owned, not-for-profit electric cooperative, our focus is on providing affordable, reliable, safe electricity and outstanding member service. One way that we're doing that is by providing more avenues of communication to you, our member. Through the podcast, we hope that you will be able to find some helpful hints, tips, and things to help you conserve energy, as well as some informational pieces that will help you understand what it means to be a member.
Thanks for joining us for part two of our series with Mike Knotts and Chris Jones, talking about the high-speed internet or the broadband conversation. If you missed last week, you need to go take a look at it. We talked about some of the things, some of the issues that are facing cooperatives and not only cooperatives, but underserved members across the state, not just in Middle Tennessee Electric's service territory. So I encourage you to go back and check that out. Let's jump back into the conversation with them this week and see what we had to say. You mentioned the governor's bill, and he recently presented that, and I believe that people can read it if they need to. When it was released, was it when it was presented, I should say, was it everything that TECA had hoped it would be, or was there some work that you guys are still trying to do?
Well, there's no such thing as a perfect piece of legislation. I've learned that very early in my career. And the governor did something for this issue that could not have been done by any other person. There's been a lot of discussion in our Capitol for many, many years about this topic, but it's been very difficult to find any common ground that could even conceivably move towards resolution, something that could be put into law. And so what Governor Haslam has done for us is to take this topic and really put a spotlight on the needs of rural Tennessee, first and foremost. He's very concerned about economic development, job recruitment in the rural parts of our state. And as he stated in his State of the State address, perhaps the best way to improve the situation in rural Tennessee is enhancing the access to broadband internet. It's the information highway. We've heard the term information highway. Yeah. It is what roads and bridges used to be 15 years ago in the legislature. I believe the information highway is today. So he made it a huge priority in the General Assembly, and for that we can't thank him enough. Are there changes that need to be made in the legislation? That's true, even if it was perfect. Right. Our legislators love to put their own thumbprint on a piece of legislation. So I'm very confident that we're on the right track, and that working together with the legislative delegation here in the Middle Tennessee Electric footprint and our friends across the state, we're going to be able to come up with legislation across the finish line, enacted into law, that's going to really accomplish our goal. So this is a really exciting time. We do encourage folks to help us get there, right. And the process can be sometimes a bumpy one, but we're very, very excited and optimistic about where we can go. So when the governor, when the conversation started, what was kind of and up until now, what was kind of the temperature of the legislation, or the legislators that you spoke to? I mean, did it seem like, hey, I see the point in this, I see value in this? Yeah, there's a great deal of excitement among the General Assembly as a whole about this initiative. Great. Because there's been some rather bitter debate over the topic in the past, and basically it was all based on some very specific subset of the argument, rather than the larger discussion about how do we solve this problem for rural Tennessee. And so the governor has been able to focus us in on solving a problem for the rural parts of our state that will also have benefit for the urban parts of our state. One thing I like to say is that for hundreds of years, the bounty of rural America, or the bounty of any rural community, has been carried into our cities, and the citizens of our cities have enjoyed that bounty. Whether it was the harvest, whether it was a product made by a craftsman, it's the goods have flowed that one way. But why can our rural communities not enjoy the benefits of those in the city? And in today's world, with technology as it is, there's no reason they shouldn't. Absolutely. And so we're very excited that Governor Haslam has seen that. That excitement is carrying over into the legislature. And so the reaction is off the charts. It's great. And so we're really excited that we can work together with our legislators from all across the state and see this come to fruition. Now, Chris, recently the leadership of Middle Tennessee Electric went and spent some time with the legislators here downtown.
what was your take on our legislators specifically, the ones that are for the counties that we serve? Was there very similar temperature?
Yeah, I would say so. In that, number one, we have a good relationship with our legislators, and that's something that we work to do. We want to be sure they're informed on our members' interests. Their constituents, our members. So, along with what Mike does on the state level, and they do, and TEC that does such a tremendous job with, we have our own efforts, and we do try to keep in close contact. So, and appreciate what they do in their service. But in our annual meeting that we have with them, it happened just a couple of weeks ago, and this was topic number one, and it was, in fact, it was the only one, because it's such an important issue, and the timing things have coalesced to such an extent that this is time for action, and I believe our legislators are ready for action. They understand, and they have heard from their constituents about the rural broadband issue. And it's not just coming from us, it's not just coming from county governments, which it is, it's coming from the constituent that's that's living in rural Rutherford, Williamson, Wilson, Cannon County. These issues are real, and they're there, and having the governor make this a legislative priority, making it a priority of the state, has certainly shown the appropriate light to say this. Indeed, this is an issue we need to grapple with. So our legislators were very receptive and are supportive of the governor's bill. As Mike mentioned, there are things that additional things we want to talk about and to see maybe augmented with relation to it. But at the end of the day, getting the governor's bill across the finish line is important, I think, to us and our legislators.
Now, Chris, we had recently, Middle Tennessee Electric, recently wrapped up a feasibility study, because I think it's really important to note that as an electric cooperative, we're not going to, if it's not in the best interest of our membership and it's not going to benefit our membership, then we're probably not going to be as ready to do something along those lines. So we recently wrapped that up, and when you took that information to the Hill and were able to talk about some of those constituents, was there surprise? I mean, were folks were you surprised when you saw some of the results as they came back?
Well, I certainly think that there's a tendency for most people, and those people who live in the more urban areas, to take for granted that this service is available, and that everybody, surely everybody has it to some extent, but they don't.
Right.
And that's the thing, as Mike has just said, it's something that's vital for living in American society today, and having knowledge and tools at your disposal to be productive and all those pieces. But a lot of people just don't have that access. So I think there's always a shock that people don't have it. And again, we're talking about high-speed internet. We're not talking about a service where you have to wait forever to the page from page number 1 to reload, and then you push a button, and then again, or it's expensive. All those things. I think there's a lot of taking it for granted going on. But something that our survey clearly demonstrated was that while there are wide varieties of service across our service territory, there are a number of people who are dissatisfied with their service. Either they don't have it, or it's too expensive, not fast enough, all those things. And they're reaching out to their electric cooperative to say, hey, can you help us make a difference here? Can you do something? So the response to our survey was many times greater than we expected it to be. That in and of itself was an eye-opener. But then to see how many people just have either very low levels of service or no service at all was even more eye-opening.
That is really an interesting point too, and I'm sure that it's something that as you alluded to, was kind of unexpected, that people just want an option. I think that's something that hopefully, as this moves along, that will be something that we can look at. Mike, what are the next steps? What are the next steps for TECA? What are the next steps for co-ops across the state, or even more specifically, their membership?
Well, assuming this bill can be passed, and assuming it's enacted into law, then the challenge becomes, how can cooperatives take on this challenge and actually perform what we're seeking to do? And that is we need to be very frank with anyone listening, that's going to take time. When the electric cooperatives were formed in the 1930s, we didn't electrify the countryside in 6 months. It took years, in some cases decades. And so while I don't want to put a timetable on what a broadband build-out might mean for Middle Tennessee Electric or any particular cooperative, we do need to be cognizant of the fact that this is a very expensive, very complicated endeavor, one that I think many cooperatives will be committed to undertaking. But we also need to understand that this is not an overnight solution. So, we may stand and celebrate and pose for a picture as the bill is signed into law, and we'll all be very happy on that day. But that's truly when the work begins, not when it ends.
And that's a perfect question, Chris, that I think is very important to put for those folks that did take the survey and did take the time to go out there. If this bill were passed, you're not going to have service next month or possibly next year. I mean, there is a time that it will take to get all that infrastructure in place. So what would be Middle Tennessee Electric's next steps under that same assumption?
Well, all of what Mike said and all of what you just alluded to, Josh, but in addition to that, something that we want to further the conversation about, and it speaks to the feasibility of us being able to do this, is to augment the existing bill. Again, we're supportive of it, but to augment that with the potential of, or the enabling of electric cooperatives to offer, in addition to high-speed internet, video and TV services attached to that. Because, and anybody watching this would I think would relate to this, if we have a service offering and we reach out and say, do you want this service, internet service, the next question is going to be, well, what about TV and video? Right. And we want to be able to say, well, sure, we can bundle that as part of it. And right now, the bill doesn't go that far.
That's correct.
So that's the next step in our work with the legislature, and in the meetings we've had with our legislators, I think that point has resonated. But again, there's work to do before we get that weaved into the legislation that's proposed.
And it's not just an issue of convenience or luxury, because somebody might want 120 channels of television, right. Or I guess these days it's more like 500 channels of television. Who knows how much is out there? It really is this topic about whether you can sell the internet and television together in a bundle is really all about creating more access to internet, right. Not so much about television itself.
That's exactly right.
Because consumers expect that product to be sold together and frankly demand that they be sold together. If you don't have that ability, you'll typically have fewer people subscribe. And where we're talking about building networks in very rural and sparsely populated areas, the economics in doing so are already very tough. Now, the cooperatives have advantages in doing that due to the fact that we can look at this over a much longer period of time than a typical for-profit company would do. But where the economics are already pretty tight, if we have fewer people subscribe because they can't get those services together, it may be enough to push someone like Chris into making the hard decision and saying, no, we just can't enter into this right. venture because we won't be able to bring in enough revenue to support it. Right. So these things really should go together, yes. And I'm very hopeful that that story is being heard, and we'll see what happens next in the legislature.
That's great, gentlemen. I thank you guys for taking the time. Take Action TN. If you want folks to jump on and support, come check us out at Middle Tennessee, MTEMC.com. Gentlemen, we appreciate it. I think we're gonna have some more conversations about this very soon. Hopefully sooner than later.
Right.
But you guys are always welcome, and we appreciate you taking
Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Sure.
Thanks for tuning in this week. Special thanks to Mike Knotts and Chris Jones for joining us to talk about this really important conversation. For more information, or if you'd like to take action, head over to takeactiontn.com and you'll find all the information that you need right there. Join us next week when we talk to Gray Bateman, our Vice President of Human Resources and Corporate Services, as we get to know him a little bit better and hear what he has to say. We'll see you then. Unmetered is brought to you by Middle Tennessee Electric.